Hi, this is Terry with Exact Line Tools. We're doing a repair on a Volvo quarter panel, and as we can see here, it's hit pretty good. It pushed the tail light in, broke it, and pushed the bumper out of its retainers and the quarter panel in. There's also some damage on the gas door, and we can see that there's damage that goes along the flare as well. There's quite a bit of damage on this quarter panel. I think we can pull that out fairly easily and straighten it out. You could see on that angle the gas door had a distortion in it that was caused by the impact. We have on the sheet to just replace that, but we will straighten it, and as we contour the quarter panel we'll do the gas door as well. Here we can see that the taillight pocket's pushed in pretty good. You can see a clip right there that holds the bumper retainer in place. We're going to remove that and do a pull. As you can see, the square hole, I pulled there to get the taillight pocket out, and you can see where I used nails to pull the general quarter panel back into rough shape. Now I've put some plastic filler along the edge of the quarter panel up against the taillight. While the taillight was fitted, I got a perfect shape in there. I'm using it as one of my control surfaces. I've masked the gas door so plastic filler wouldn't enter that area. As I said, I'm using the edge of the quarter panel where it meets the taillight as my control surface toward the rear of the car, and the control surface on the other side would be just ahead of the gas door, the area that I've lightly sanded into the undamaged portion of the quarter panel. Now I'm applying my plastic filler and covering all the area really well so I can begin doing my sweeps. We want to get good adhesion of the plastic filler to the entire area that we're going to sweep. So that's what I'm doing right here. We'll continue to cover that until we're satisfied with that being completely covered. Now I'm going to take the number 1 blade, the stiffest blade, and I'm going to do my initial sweep. Again, resting it on the quarter panel just where the taillight pocket meets the quarter panel, and on the other side just ahead of the gas door. Now I'm removing the plastic filler from the edge of the blade and applying it at the top of the sweep. This gives me an abundant amount of plastic filler to roll across the surface as I impart the shape that we're looking to achieve. Here we have a nice sweep, looks really good. There's a little gap in the gas door there. We'll continue to do this. If you take your time and move across the surface with the blade, you can get a really great sweep if you just take your time, press down on the 2 control surfaces, and allow the blade to move and organize the plastic filler for you. Sometimes it helps to slow it down a little bit in the sweep. And we have some rough areas to the left of the gas door, a lot of pinholes and whatnot, so we're going to do a few more sweeps here. Again, loading it up at the top of the sweep, at the front of the sweep, then making our transition down allows for the plastic filler to be moved and organized, and you have enough filler to go around. Here I've lightly scored the area around the gas door just so I kind of keeping that freed up a little bit, and I'm removing any other areas that are sticking up from the surface. I'm now taking my finished DA with some 180 grit on it, and I'm going to lightly go over this. Now I'm going to sand this for about a minute or two, just knocking down the surface, making sure we have a smooth surface to make our next sweep over. It doesn't take too much sanding. We haven't overfilled the situation. By resting the blade on the control surface just to the right of the gas door and the other control surface right at the end of the quarter panel where the taillight pocket begins. Those are my two control surfaces, and if I press tightly on those, everything in between will take the appropriate shape. On the first sweep, we don't always get a perfect shape, perfect surface, but it lays the groundwork for a perfect sweep in either the next sweep or the one after that. Knocking this down a little bit here. Blowing it off, have a take a look at that. Yeah, you can see we still have some pinholes to the left of the gas door. None of this means anything at this point. We'll apply another coat of plastic filler. I'm using about a 25% putty glaze with 75% body filler mix. This gives it a nice viscosity, and I can move it around pretty easily. The combination or the mix that you might want to work with could be different depending on the temperature and the shape that you're trying to reproduce. You see, we've gone right over the gas door here. This will be our second sweep. Again, we're going to use the number 1 blade and transition over this wet mud until we get a sweep that we like. Now you can see immediately that the second sweep over it is much better in appearance and in shape, and that's pretty common. The first sweep generally gets a panel roughly into shape, and as you move over that, it'll continue to bring better and better shape with each sweep. Now we're lightly sanding it once again with 180 grit and a finish DA, just knocking it down. You can see the surface is a little bit nicer here. The shape is coming along very well, and it's not far from being perfect. We have some surface issues to sand out, but it's coming along very quickly. We only are sanding in between these applications of plastic filler about a minute or two. So the amount of sanding that we're doing in this repair is very small, as it is in most of the repairs we do using the blade. Continue sanding this for a little bit. Again, we're using 180 grit on a finish DA. We're not removing much paint or much plastic filler in this case. We're just smoothing down the texture of the plastic filler. And it doesn't take too much time because we're not dealing with overfill. We're knocking down this lip on the flare of the quarter panel, just smoothing that out a little bit. That will be a control surface to sweep over when we do the flare. We're going to correct the shape of that lip on the outer flare, and as I say, use it as one of the control surfaces on the next sweep. We'll sand up here above that a little bit, smooth it out a little more, just knocking down any rough spots. Alright, that feels real good here. Now we're going to straighten out this lip on the flare. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to block it on the flat surface for a little bit until I get it flat with the rest of the flare. Just kind of rocking the block back and forth to accommodate the slight curve, but basically holding it so I can get a nice flat cut across that lip on the flare. Alright, we've blown it off. Now I'm scribing a line which corresponds to the rest of the flare. The lip has a specific width, And we're doing that with a simple scribe. Now I'm going to put a little bit of guide coat on that area that I've masked off. I've masked along the line that I drew, and beyond that the plastic filler continued, and that's what I put the guide coat on. Now I'm going to sand that plastic filler down with the edge of the DA, and you can see even from the position of the camera, I'm much closer looking at it as I sand it, but even from the camera's perspective you can see that little bit of area between the tape and the plastic filler that needed to be sanded down, and it's indicated by the black of the guide coat. It makes it really easy to keep track of it. Even while you're sanding and creating dust, you can watch that line move closer to the tape when you have the black guide coat on there. When you get to the tape, it's as far as we need to go at this point. Keep sanding that a little bit. The next sweep we're going to do is the flare itself, and that's why we want to create a nice line on that lip on the flare. Now here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do our sweep right across it and then rolling it across the flare. That'll be the area in general that we're going to bring new shape to right now. Applying our plastic filler, pushing it in, pushing it tight up against the paint and the metal to get a good adhesion. Covering the entire area that we want to sweep. We're using the number 3 blade on this one. It's got a bit more of a curve to it, and this will accommodate nicely. As you remember me saying, when doing the first sweep, you usually have a lot of distortions in the panel, and it's a little tricky creating the first sweep. It doesn't always come out exactly perfect, but not to worry, the next sweep will make it great. But first we're going to lightly sand this area down and prepare it for the next sweep. Again, we're using the 180 grit, and we're just buzzing across it fairly quickly. We'll spend a minute or two sanding this area, and we will prepare it for the next sweep. So basically what we're doing is lightly sanding, preparing the surface, applying our plastic filler with the blade, lightly sanding it down, and repeating until the surface has the shape that we desire. Knocking the plastic filler a little bit off the top here. I've put a little extra along there, just pressed it into any of the little pinholes I found. I often do that when I have a little extra plastic filler. When you run your hand across, you can feel a little bit of areas that might still have a little roughness to them. Just smooth them down. It's a fine paper. 180 grit doesn't take off a whole lot of material, so you don't have to be too worried about that. It's one of the virtues of using the fine paper, along with a whole lot of other things that it's very helpful with. Knocking that flare down a little bit, getting it smoothed out. Got to blow this out. Make sure we get the dust out of any of the rough spots, any pinholes. Clean it out real nice. That looks real good. We'll finish this area. Be close to wrapping up this job. We're applying our plastic filler on the flare. We have the lip of the flare masked off with tape because we're satisfied with where that line is. And we're applying the plastic filler to the entire area that we're going to sweep. This time I'm going to try the number 2 blade. It should be just fine, and we'll see in a second. That works great. Now there's a really nice sweep. We could have left that, but I'm just going to go over it a few times. As you see, as we moved along, it's becoming progressively better and better in terms of shape. So we have this cured, and we're sanding it down with 180 grit on the finished DA, just knocking it down quickly. We'll spend another minute or two on that. Again, the times that we spend sanding this are remarkably low. We're not putting much time at all into this because it already has a defined shape that's very accurate. We can continue to sand this down, knocking it down. It's looking pretty good. We'll hit the top area a little bit as well. We filled a few more pinholes there, so we put a very thin coat, pressed it in good, and removed all the filler except for that in the pinholes. Continue to sand it out a little bit here. Just turning the DA so I can get in there into that curve. Right, we can see a little bit of a rough area still on the flare, right about where I'm sanding. See a rough texture, kind of like pinholes and whatnot right through this area. I'm going to do a little sweep there. Doesn't need much at all, so I'm just going to use the plastic spreader and fill those pinholes. And I'm going to just sweep it with this spreader and get a nice curve in that, and that should be fine as well. We already have the shape there. We're just correcting surface texture issues, so I'm not I feel fine about using just a plastic spreader. Make a couple more sweeps, see if we can get that a little bit nicer. That looks pretty good. All looks good. We're going to we've sanded it down and we put some guide coat on it. So we're going to get this moved along into the block sanding portion of it. Being sure to get the guide coat all over it, everywhere we want to sand. I'm going to first start with this broader area of the quarter pound, then we'll come back and do the flare. So I'm going to be using my hard block with 180 grit, and we're going to block off that area starting right over the gas door. And I do this area so I can get to the point where I can show the gas door just blends in perfectly with the rest of the panel. And you can see a little indentation around the perimeter of the gas door where it where the separation is between the gas door and the quarter panel, but that's about it. It has a real nice line, smooths over really nice. The contour is exact all the way across that entire area, which means the gas door will carry the same shape as the quarter panel, which you almost never get, even in a new car. But because we're repairing this panel, we can adjust the gas door to perfectly take the shape of the quarter panel as well. Okay, now we're going to put some guide coat on this flare portion of the quarter panel and block that out. I'm going to be using 180 grit on a flexible hard block. It's a spring steel block, and it simply by rocking it back and forth and twisting it a bit, I can accommodate the curve of this flare very nicely. I'll be sanding right up to the tape line, which is the outer face of the flare, or the lip of the flare, and I'll be going up to the curved portion where it meets the other plane of the quarter panel. cleaning the block off a little bit in the area. And getting back into the sanding. It sands down pretty quickly. It's got a real nice shape to it. And I'm sanding right to the curve where the flare ends and the overall shape of the quarter panel begins. Just knocking this down. We'll spend a couple minutes with this. Again, this is our block sanding of the panel, and we're only spending a few minutes in each area, which is something worth considering. And we're doing that sanding with a fine grit paper, which further puts an even sharper point on the idea of giving the body very precise shape with the blade. We'll just continue sanding this flare until we get all the areas sanded down. This is how it looks. Now we're going to finish the area where the two contours meet. The flare meets the overall shape of the quarter panel, putting a little bit of guide coat in there. And I'm using another hard block, which is a custom block that has a very nice curve to it. It's a nice straight hard block, and I can sand this curved area with great precision as well. These blocks are not available, but we are producing blocks that will be the exact design, and they will be coming in the future. Just rolling the block in there, cutting down that area so the two panels, the two contoured surfaces meet. The flare and the overall shape of the quarter panel meet seamlessly into a curve. It's sanding out really nicely, getting it finished up. Very good. Now the last step is to drill the gas door open. So we're simply putting an 1/8 inch drill bit, holding it up against either the quarter panel or the gas door. Now this sometimes can put a little mark on either panel, the gas door or the quarter panel. I've never had any issues with just sanding it and primering it, and it generally gives you enough fill to just sand any of that out. But that is something you can consider. Other than that, it's a nice way to open the gas door. While the gas door was in position with the plastic filler, sanding it held it exactly in place. So when I relieve it now by drilling it out, it'll have an exact perfect shape for the rest of the panel, which is always a nice thing, to have any panel fit right with an adjacent panel, even a gas door. Alright, we've got that drilled out. We're going to pull the release and open it up, and we're good to finish that. Well, here's the car after paint. I've assembled it partially, and we have the tail light in place. You can see here that the quarter panel lines up precisely with the tail light, likewise with the bumper cover. We fitted those and accommodated that line with our first application of plastic filler. Now if we look at the overall quarter panel, we see that it has a beautiful shape in it. The gas door is as if it's part of the quarter panel, which means it fits perfectly to the quarter panel. The flare has a beautiful shape around it. It's got the correct line that just sweeps across the entire panel. It is a perfectly shaped panel that doesn't look anything other than a brand new quarter panel. There again, you can see how perfectly it fits with the tail light.